They want $3.5 billion for the mail-in votes, okay, universal mail-in ballots. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting.
So much of the Democratic asks are really liberal left wish lists. We don't want to have voting rights and aid to aliens and so forth. That's not our game, and the president can't accept that kind of deal.
All right, so let's see if we can break down the absolute insanity that we just witnessed. Okay, so let's remind ourselves how this works. So we know that Trump is out there trying to spread this idea amongst people and get them to believe that mail-in voting is fraudulent and doesn't work. The number of fraudulent votes cast, both in person and through the mail, is very, very small, okay? Especially if you're on paper systems, which mail-in balloting is. Okay, you can get into other conversations when you have electronic voting machines, but when you have a piece of paper, right, you gain a few things with that. One, you can do a recount trusted and easily. You just run that paper through there again, it counts them all up. If you just have a machine telling you something on a screen, you don't really know what it comes up to. But mail-in ballots, you can take that stack, run them through again, and see what happens. Now, until you think about it, it seems like, well, yeah, couldn't a foreign country just print up a bunch of ballots, send them in, and then it would be totally fraudulent? No, it's harder than that, because generally, even within a city, you might have many different types of ballots, okay? So it would be hard for, say, China or Russia to print up many, many ballots when there might only be a few thousand. And then think about when they start sending them in. Well, the state, when they count these votes, is going to get some that are from an actual human being that sent in their legitimate vote, and then the duplicate that some other foreign country sent in. Right? Then red flags are going to go up. Oh, we have something going wrong here. So it's actually very hard to be fraudulent with mail-in balloting in a way that isn't going to be obvious. Right? And then the fact that you'd have to have a lot of people involved. The more people you have involved, the more likely someone's gonna talk, and then things are gonna come up. So this idea that he is pushing, that mail-in ballot are going to be very fraudulent. There's no evidence for any of this, right? Look at the history of this country. There's very little evidence that that's going to happen, okay? So Trump doesn't want people voting because, as we know, he's very, very unpopular in this country. So besides the fact that he is just trying to convince people that mail-in voting is bad, he is also basically conducting an all-out assault on the post office. So he has put this individual, DeJoy, in place of the post office, who, by the way, has conflicts of interest with the fact that he's even in the post office in the first place because of the private business he came with. But let's not even get into that. It is very clear that DeJoy is implementing procedures in the name of cost cutting, and it's not even clear that what he's doing is going to really cut costs in any kind of meaningful way, but cost cutting. So he's cutting things like overtime. So as soon as you hit your time and you start overtime, you stop working. Right there, you're done. If you've got ballots that still need to be run through the sorters and put through the mail, nope, you don't do it. You're done, right? He's also gone through and cut a lot of upper management, the very type of people that have been there for a long time, understand the post office. DeJoy does not have a history of working in the post office, right? Basically, he's a donor who gave a bunch of money to Trump, and like many of the top positions in this country, Trump's putting his donors in there. Okay, so this is not an individual who fundamentally understands the inner workings of the post office, but he's in there. He cut a bunch of upper management so that they can't keep things on the tracks here, right? So they're cut, and we're already seeing slowdowns in the post office, right? People are already reporting that something that should have taken 2 days to get mailed is now taking 4 days to get mailed. So this is a problem, and imagine the problem this is going to pose for when ballots are being counted, right? Many states have rules that say, okay, if your ballot is postmarked by a certain date and we get it in the next 1 or 2 days, it's still counted. Well, what if now what used to be expected to be able to be completed in 1 or 2 days is now taking 4? That's now going to be a lot of ballots that don't get counted. So we're going to see a few things. We're going to see a ton of lawsuits over ballots getting counted. if we still are in this issue, right, of the post office basically self-destructing right now. So there's going to be lots of lawsuits from it. And in many cases, people's ballots are not going to be counted. It's being argued this will disproportionately affect people with less money, which is probably true, right? That's probably absolutely true. So we need to protect the post office. We need to get in there and make sure that it can work, because this is a very special time. We're living in the time of coronavirus. It makes sense that people aren't going to show up in person. They still have their right to vote. This shouldn't even be a question, right? This is showing a hole in our democracy and in our checks and balances. The fact that this individual can be breaking down the post office in a time when we need it more than ever, simply because he thinks it's going to affect his chances at being elected president again, right? Which he wants very much, because there's a number of lawsuits that he's going to have to deal with as soon as he leaves office. So we've got this remark from Larry Kudlow, which is complaining about how the Democrats want voting rights, but the president just can't have any part of that, right? Which I think is very telling. Both of these individuals came out and said things that they're not really supposed to be saying.
So much of the Democratic asks are really liberal left wish lists. We don't want to have voting rights and aid to aliens and so forth. That's not our game, and the president can't accept that kind of deal.
Right? But it doesn't seem to matter, right? Going back to Trump's argument that he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any voters, that's sort of panning out, right? He's shooting our democracy on Fifth Avenue, and, how many votes is he losing over it?
They want $3.5 billion for the mail-in votes, okay, universal mail-in ballots. $3.5 trillion. They want $25 billion for the post office. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. Now, in the meantime, they aren't getting there. By the way, those are just two items. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting.
So we need to make sure that we fund the post office. However you feel about the post office long term, and actually the post office is quite popular, but even if you're someone who doesn't agree with the post office, we absolutely need it this year so that we can conduct our democracy. There isn't going to be a democracy being conducted without the post office delivering ballots for people. Okay, people are not going to be able to show up in person. Because of the virus, people are going to be afraid to show up. There is no good reason why we shouldn't be using mail-in ballots, but we need a functional post office in order to do that. And then Trump says it himself, right? We just heard him say it. Look, they want all this money so that people can vote, right? So that we can have universal mail-in balloting. Yeah, so that every American citizen can vote. That's literally what our country is about, is that all American citizens are supposed to be able to vote. And Trump's just out saying it. Larry Kudlow and Trump just came out and sort of admitted the whole thing that many of us have been talking about for weeks, saying, look, we got to pay attention to this post office. You got to look at the post office, look at what's happening here. And people just go, yeah, post office is kind of a boring subject. I don't want to think about it much. It literally is one of the keys to destroying our democracy at the moment. So we need to make sure that the Democrats can push through and protect the post office. But the Republican side keeps wanting to say, well, they've got all these other things that they want to fund besides just helping people. Yeah, because being able to vote is helping people, right? That's part of our Constitution, is that American citizens are supposed to be able to vote. We need to ensure that those voting securities are in place. We have a functional post office who can deliver the ballots in time to be counted. I mean, it's not that difficult. It's very simple what we need to do here. And if we need to give some money to the post office to do it, we gave tons of money to giant corporations that don't even pay their workers very much, right? The least we can do is fund the post office to make sure that we have a functional democracy. Thanks for checking out the video. Head on over to Twitch. Check me out, Political Perspective, over on Twitch, trying to get that channel up and running. I'd love to see you over there. It's great interaction with the chat while we're live streaming. So check that out. Otherwise, we'll see you in the future.